series. As always, you can find videos of previous presentations on our website. That is humana.io. And it's in the articles section. You can filter by speakers. And almost all of our talks are posted on YouTube. And we're going to start adding some slides to those as well. So if you can't make a week, or if you've got friends who don't live in Louisville who work for Humana and they can't make it over here, feel free to share. So today, we are proud to have some former collaborators speaking with us today about their experience in the deck and taking some of those practices with them out into the larger organization. The My Humana mobile app team, Matt Coddington and Neil Normal.
Hello, Louisville. How you doing tonight? Sorry, get a mic in my hand. I think I'm performing on stage. So we're here to give our experience of what it's been like to be in the deck and then to go back out into the real world. So, clicker here. First, a little backstory. So I'm the product manager of the My Humana mobile app, and Neil is the product designer. And this is my second time that I had an opportunity to be in the deck. The first time was with the Vitality app. I had joined Bob Ford in the last couple of months of the app being in the deck in 2015, and then we took that out on it. So I've actually had 2 times to experience this, although it's been a lot more robust than the My Humana, so that's why we keep the subject around. And so last year, I came in about January. The app was already in the deck and was already under development with Neil Lazo acting as the product manager. And then he moved on back over to the DCOE in the tower, and then I took over. And so we're here until about June, and then we went on over into Waterfront, and that's where we currently reside. So just a little slide here that we're going to go over a little bit of detail here. I'm only kidding. Is this not the most god-awful ugly thing you've ever seen? So first, I just want to pull up some quotes that was from Tom Delancey spoke a few weeks ago about his experience with trying to be deck-like with his Agile team. And he had 2 quotes that I wanted to steal and put into our deck. And the one was, sadly, once you come to work in the deck, you can't go back. So that's what we're going to be talking about, that we have, and how we survived that. And also, there was a comment about it's been proven difficult to spread the deck practices to other areas, and we're going to talk about some of those challenges that we do face. So, it's obviously a different working model. Many of you have been here for many presentations and heard people talk about what the model is, or you've just seen all the folks who work here and see the model in which that they work. Currently, traditional Agile teams are like this, to where you end up having, now this isn't all inclusive, but I just wanted to point out, we've got a Scrum Master, Product Owner, UAT, and Business Analyst that will be part of an Agile team. And in our environment, it basically rolls up into this. So you end up having the product manager. So there are pluses and minuses to that, things that as we've, through the months, experienced things and certainly wished that there were more involvement, but I think the pluses far outweigh it as far as how it all comes down to me as product manager to be able to make the decisions, and things can happen a lot faster. But then certainly when the workload gets heavy, I wish there was some additional people helping with this. We'll speak more about that as far as how Neil and I partnered together on that. So then there's product designer.
Hello. As you can see, I've been failing the CAPTCHA, I am not a robot. I'm Neil Norman, product designer for Humana, and the first note I think to really spell out is that the role of product designer really sort of only exists here in the deck. Outside in the rest of the world, with the UX Center of Practice, there really isn't that title. So you have these, so Matt showed the slide earlier with all the different Fisher-Price folks. It's very much sort of that same concept in the UX Center of Practice. You have folks that are content strategists, you have copywriters, you have interaction designers versus visual designers. You have folks that are doing the research and facilitating the testing. You have folks who specialize in accessibility. And I don't mean to disparage all the folks that are in those specific roles. They play a valuable part in the process. But the challenge, of course, is that every product is not going to have one person with each one of those skills embedded into their team. So the notion here that the product designer, the one or two people that handle that entire skill set, there is a lot of value in that. Obviously, if you're one person doing all of that, you're going to have certain blind spots, certain parts of that skill set that you're maybe not as good at, certain things you're better at. But the difference is that while you're here and while you're being, not only having the opportunity to take control of all those things, but really the expectation to handle all of those things, you learn to improve those skills as you go. For instance, before I came on here, I was not involved in the user research, usability testing at all. In the year and a half that I was here, by the end of that, I've been doing that every week and felt fairly confident in that process and understanding the value of that process. So needless to say, if you have all of those different roles siloed amongst different people, folks who aren't embedded in your team, folks who are sort of on loan from the UX center of practice, none of those folks are necessarily going to have the same intimate knowledge of your users and your product the way someone who's actually on the team is. So there's advantages and disadvantages there, you could say. One or two people having to handle all of those things, obviously it's a lot to take in. But you can at least be assured that everything is in service of that one product. I would say that, again, one of the other disadvantages is that we aren't paired as designers, typically, outside of the deck. When I first came here, again, it was a little strange, the notion of two designers working in the same file. I quickly not only became used to that, but actually preferred that way of working. Now that it's just me, there is not that person sitting right next to you that is that constant check against your own biases. So the onus is on you to really reach out to other designers, to reach out to other folks, to get feedback, to see if you're barking up the wrong tree, and obviously to test things. More about that in a second. Now, in our particular case here, which is sort of maybe unusual, maybe not, I don't know, but I feel like Matt and I are sort of the pair in a way. So it's like product/design pair. I've helped him write stories in the past. I always turn to him with questions related to design, in the same way that I'm turning to the other developers and other designers. So that may be slightly unusual, but I feel like it's worked fairly well for us to kind of think of us as two lobes of the same product brain, if you will. One of the misconceptions about our, the deck model, if you will, is that it has to do with tools. I think there's this notion, and obviously the tools are important, don't get me wrong, but I think there's this notion of placing greater emphasis on the tools. And it's really not about the tools, it's about the process. It's about the constant discussion. It's about the iteration. It's about the testing those iterations and learning from those. In other words, it doesn't matter what tools you have, as long as they are the tools that best facilitate that process. It could be whatever you have in front of you, as long as you're actively talking with the other folks on your team. And again, gaining insight into testing, which brings us to in my opinion, the biggest problem, leaving it there. Any product that comes through here, part of the price of admission is the constant testing, getting actual users in on a weekly basis or some kind of cadence to actually validate the things you're working on. When we left the deck, we were reliant upon all the different lines of business budgets to keep feeding the product. And I say my Humana at this stage is almost like a collection of products rather than one big project. So it kind of makes sense, I guess, to some degree. But when that happens, obviously, you have to then turn around and explain the value of UX and the value of testing, not just one entity, but several different lines of businesses, and explain why that's so critical. So in other words, there's not been nearly as much testing on the product since it left the bin. And we know that's an issue, and we're working with the UX Center of Practice to rectify that, but there's only so much you can do. I think I'm kind of about out of things to talk about as far as that goes, but so I'll turn it back over to Matt.
All right. So I know that there are some teams that are currently working in the deck, and they're probably wondering, since we've been talking about some of this, like what's the experience going to be like once we actually come out onto the deck? In short, it certainly is, traumatic is a strong word, but when when we were in here, you get spoiled by the fact that I had Sean, I had Becky, I had Nick. At some point in time, there was a product manager beside me, so you had two product managers. At one point, there were 4 designers that were working. So it was 2 working iOS, 2 Android, and all of them hammering away on designs together. As Neil mentioned, doing the Thursday usability, having people come in so that you'd iteratively put together a concept, you'd show it to people and modify that before it even got developed, or as we're starting to develop, make tweaks and say, okay, that button didn't make sense to them, let's rethink it, etc. And then there was a small army of developers working on it as well, so many engineers. So suddenly, the next thing you know, it's Max, Neil, and I think it might have been Kyle at the time, and Julio. So like 5 of us suddenly packing our boxes, walking down the street and going to the waterfront, and settling up to some desks. Now, of course, our work environment is not like this, but we try to make it as much like it as possible. We've got, actually, it's like counter along the windows, so we've got standing desks, and they don't raise up and down like this fancy ones here, but we still were able to try to keep that feeling where we are shoulder to shoulder. So Neil is immediately to my left, and Matt Gladfelter is to his left, and now Max is working on the 365 team at one point in time, and you're right there together. So, immediately there's just that feeling of like, wow, you've lost like the energy that's here in the deck, but we try to keep as much of the spirit of the way that we operate. We still do like, we're in at 8, it can come 5, we're done. At first I was playing the Push It song at the end of the night, but people on the floor weren't too hip to me for the Push It while they might be on a call or whatever, so I stopped doing that. So I want to cover a couple things that I think that we're doing well as we try to continue on outside of the deck. And the one thing, again, in the spirit of the way that the deck model operates, is our highest priority is to satisfy the member through early and continuous delivery of reliable software. So that we often, even all the engineers, little sidebar, the majority of our engineers are in Uruguay. So they're near shore, so we still do paired development. So they are on all day together doing test-driven development and working in pairs. Haven't helped anybody who has a team where you do have offshore people that are literally, in 10.5 hours away. You can't operate in this model and be able to have this quick feedback like that you do. But those engineers frequently, when we talk about MVP, as we're talking through something as a group, that they'll say, well, how about if we, for MVP, we consider this? And so it's great just to hear that mindset that they have. They know that we can iterate, and so that we're currently working on a feature for spending accounts, and we're going to iterate on that with something that as we've been developing along, we've made a discovery and not have the luxury of all that user testing, but just from us working through together as a team and being open and communicating about it, we realize there's something else we need to add, and we'll iterate. And so we're going to do a release probably, I would say, in the next week or so, and within a week or so after that, we're going to do another release that will have some additional functionality to it, however long it takes for us to do that feature. So that's something I think we're doing well. We also try to follow in that model of, and I use this quote that Antonio had put together a great reply one time when someone had challenged, and I said, we don't develop on the intersection of time and scope. We choose one as the anchor. And sometimes it's not really realistic, particularly when we've had some projects that we have done that were with a waterfall team, and they need to be locked into some things. And so then you have both ends of the spectrum, extreme lean development model and the waterfall model, and how we're going to get together so that when they're going to do their turn and they want to know when we're going to have these boxes checked off, etc. But we've worked with them as best as we can so that we're not, and even some of our engineers had said, let's be mindful that we don't allow them to pull us back into the old way of doing things. So we made modifications without feeling like we're getting pulled back, but we just said, hey, we don't understand, especially I had to work with the PM for them to understand. They're asking for certain checkboxes. When is your SIT going to be done? When's your UAT going to be done, et cetera? And just educate them on the way that you're looking at UAT. So my acceptance of that story means that story right then, if we wanted to do a release to the store, that function in that story could be enjoyed by a user. And so that with their waterfall method, it just doesn't even calculate in their head. But I think that we're doing well with that. Another thing is as recent as like 2014, 2015, because I've been working on the Humana app since like 2012, when we first changed it from being a web-based app, HTML5 app, to potentially being a native app. And in that older model with the Scrum Master and so on and so forth, that you had those, even though it was agile, you still had the sprints with the stories that were for that sprint. And if you suddenly needed to do something different, it took an act of God for you to add another story for that to be done. And be like, well, then what story are you pulling out of this sprint? You can't be doing that as well as those others because we've already committed, and just, even though it was agile, it seemed so locked in. Maybe some of you, I see some heads nodding, that might still experience that now, and it's very, very liberating, and you feel like much more empowered to really just be developing impactfully on a regular basis, because if you need to, no pun on the pivotal thing, but if you need to pivot and suddenly say, we need to change direction on this, and we're going to introduce a story because it was a discovery made by any of us, then we can do it, and there's not a big hoo-ha about it. I want to brag about PCF, Pivotal Cloud Foundry, and our microservices. That has been something that has been a gift from the deck that we've been able to take forward, and some other teams are now leveraging PCF as well. So that's good to see that, that we've been pioneering that, and I think we have about a dozen, how many Max? Or maybe, how many? 18 microservices. And so then if there's any particular thing, like right now we're working on the spending account part, that you suddenly make those changes in that microservice and deploy those. And speaking of as well, that we just have now enabled zero downtime development, deployment, zero downtime deployment. So yeah, known as blue-green, and so everyone's going to start to enjoy that as well. But that means that any time of the day, no ATP, that we can make a change to a microservice and deploy it, and there's no downtime. If something hiccuped on it, you're right back to the initial instance that you had.
And the reason that's important is because there's no interruption to the customer's experience.
Right.
It's not just because it's technically interesting, which it is. The point is, your work has your customer at its core. Well done.
Exactly, yes. And I know in recent past, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit because someone did make a comment, I think, that I've got on a slide, but what I didn't mean to advance to one to where it just shows when we came out of the deck, but here's our team. All of us. But that we had an instance with Humana 1, the Pay My Bill feature, that there were some members that it turns out were not seeing Pay My Bill appropriately. We had been given the information from the premium billing service IT team way back. This is in the old version of the app, what the logic was for us to be able to show who should see it or not see it in the menu. And the logic that we had turns out that we were not fully covering everybody who was an H1 member who could see Pay My Bill. So then when this member had written on in, then we checked on it and found out, yes, indeed, there were some members that are not seeing it. So then we checked that team and found we could use a much broader logic towards like, are they in the PBS system as if they've got a profile and they're not Medicare, then great, they get to see Pay My Bill. So suddenly it solved it for that person. Well, when we did that, we made that microservice change and did it very quickly, and that member, when I ended up emailing him and saying, okay, check now, and emailed back and says, great, I can see it, and I'll show you the little quote that he had. But it was just a good feeling just how quickly we were able to identify that. He might have emailed at 10 o'clock in the morning, and that evening, suddenly he's checking and sees that everything is good. So it's just great to be able to have that ability. We didn't have to involve ourselves in an ETP and all other hoops to jump through. We made it right for that, and who knows how many others were not necessarily seeing it because that logic was wrong. And so that new way, and it was a quick fix. So another thing, this is not just with the deck, but something certainly that the mobile app team has the luxury to enjoy, and that is our ability to, not just through the microservices, but just the app is unique as compared to the web properties, is we've got our finger on the pulse of members and what they like or don't like all the time, because we're seeing the App Store reviews, Google Play Store reviews, as well as the member feedback that they can email either just to mobile developers, which is published in various places, like on the stores, or even some of our web properties say you can email mobile developers, or they can send feedback right straight through the app, so that we routinely end up getting some feedback. Now, of course, these I was just wanting to show off some of the good ones, but this one here is where it now gives me the option to pay my bill. Thank you so much for looking at this fixing for me. Makes me feel like I chose a good insurance company that takes care of customers, even when something as small as that. And so it's cool that he ended up taking the time to email that on back. And then otherwise, people just bragging about the app. But at the same time, when we hear the negative ones as well, we're looking into an issue that is it from the app side or is it from the services we're calling, to where sometimes people say, hey, drug pricing, it'll say that there's no pharmacies that are available. That can't be. So that, again, we'll tackle that and look at that issue, but we're able to hear that a lot more frequently than, I guess from web properties, you're largely going to be relying upon maybe customer care is going to be reporting something and saying, hey, we're seeing a trend, because we're getting a lot of calls or people secure messaging in saying we've got an issue and then identifying it, and it just feels a lot slower that way, whereas we're routinely, as a matter of fact, even I wish it was for the App Store, but for Google Play, I have an app on my phone to where I get notification the moment someone posts a comment. And so about 11 o'clock this morning, someone had posted, and it was 5 stars and just says, great app, very reliable. And I was able to reply right away to them and just say, thanks so much. If you ever have any questions, email to mobile developers. And it's a good feeling just knowing that they made that post, and if they did pay attention to the fact that someone had replied to their comment in the store, they had that feeling of like, wow, Humana's really on it. And so, again, there's supposed to be some new functionality coming to iOS to where you can actually reply to the comments, etc. And I hope that there also will be an app so it can be as easy. Because, again, they'll even show up on my watch. I was looking at it, gosh, just got a new review. And if it happens to be one that's bad, which in the recent past we've had some issues with passwords and whatnot, we introduced Touch ID, actually fingerprint for Android, and an email went out to almost 1 million members. And so there were many people that were suddenly confused because they've never used their fingerprint on their phone. So with each of those that might come on in, we at least had an idea. It's like, yes, we're hearing something on this. So it's just something that is, again, not really something that's just inherent to the deck, but really to the mobile team, and I wish other teams could have that same ability. I want to cover a couple things that, another thing is that this year alone, we've done 7 releases of the app since January. And I think that's really kind of a low number, but that's largely because one of the features was working with the Waterfall team for us to do a release that was right here at the beginning of April. So we had to time, and as we were working on that, it was unusual. We usually don't end up having a separate branch, but we did so that we could work on some other things, so that if we wanted to do another release, but then that one was kind of pending, waiting for them to turn this past weekend, and now both apps are in the store waiting for review, and then we'll go live with that feature. But 7 still nothing to shake a stick at, but we look forward to continuing to have a couple releases a month. We should be able to have that because that's just the way our stories work, is that each story has value, and we can do a release with it and let it go on out. And so things they're not doing so well. Neil had already touched about the fact that the testing part, that's something we really long for, to where as we continue to develop other features, like most recently we're now doing that spending account, so that if you do have a receipt that needs verification, you can snap a picture of it and submit it on right from your phone. And it would have been great as we're developing that it's not the exact same as what was in the app in the previous version. Similar, overall the functionality is the same thing what you're doing. You can snap up 4 pictures and submit them, but as we were designing that, we would have loved to have had some feedback where just the members would have been looking at that, even if they'd just been looking at comps and saying, yeah, this doesn't make sense to me, allow us to shape it. Instead, we'll just pay attention to feedback as the new members are doing that. So we look forward to it rolling into our process again, to where we routinely could be getting in front of members and having them offer the feedback as we develop. Some of the challenges that we're facing is, like last year, 2016, that we were already in the deck, and I was already seeing the roadmap for the rest of the year, and there were 30 projects this long that we were committed to doing. So that was just something that we're working on now, and I'm working with Suzanne from my team, to where we're trying to make sure that when things do come across for estimates, that we're realistic, and we look at the volume of work that's supposed to come, because we want to continue to operate in this model to where we're delivering value frequently, and yet then many projects will just be tagged mobile too. And so we just need to look and say, okay, and advise and make sure that we've got a realistic workload. So it's not that we don't want to do the work, but we have to get to a point where once we got out in June, and then I suddenly looked and tried to map it out on a dry erase board, I'm like, here's all the rest of the projects, and then see the size of the estimate for each one. I was like, holy cow, we're not going to get all this done before the end of the year. So I had to prioritize what I could against that. And I know I really probably faces a similar challenge to where you can end up being handed more work than you can handle. But that's something we certainly struggled with, and this year I think we've got a better handle on it. As a matter of fact, to the point where I'm also a little concerned we don't have enough clarity project work currently lined up, but I don't think that will last for very long. But we want to continue to always have a improvements budget to be able to be working off of as well. We don't really have a bucket for that, so we're looking so that we can continue. There's things that either come from member feedback or just from the team saying, you know what we really need to do, we really need to take a look at, you know, and some minor things like making sure that we're ready for the next version of iOS that's coming out, the next version of Android that's coming out, and having, you know, that's not something that's going to be part of a clarity project. We've got to have some money to be able to explore and to make sure that we're on top of all that stuff as well. So, I already mentioned about the challenge of working with waterfall teams, and as well as, you know, PMs wanting us to check boxes in that ERM model that are part of our process. And we continue to work through that and just try to, upfront, when I know I've got a new PM to work with, to just say, let me educate you on the way that we operate, and so try to get out ahead of that and also try to avoid the meetings. I know Tom had showed in his presentation where like what his calendar looks like now, and you see it like almost like meeting free, which, you know, is delightful, and I wish that I could say the same. But I try as much as possible to defer some of those meetings and say, listen, I can status with you, or every week on a Tuesday I send out the update of what we're currently working on, and if you'd like, I'll just copy you on that, but I don't think I need to be present at every single one of these meetings. So I challenge everyone to really to look at that and just say, do you need to just because someone invited you? You know, it erodes your productivity. Another challenge, sometimes people will be asking for designs, wires, again, this kind of leads back over to the waterfall, but they'll be asking for designs and wires, but you know, they'll refer to that. They want to see some wires months in advance of when, you know, it was like January, someone was asking for something, they wanted to see the wires for the June work. And it's like, I can show you that in about April. Because we're doing more of that just-in-time development. You know, when we get closer to that, and of course we're leaving enough runway for us to do whatever we need to do, but it's not going to be in that. We waterfall Agile to death, even in that typical Agile, so the water dial, you know, and just try to really just still get it all. Well, let me back up from UAT to SIP, and that means all your development has to be done here, so your const shooting needed to be done 8 months ago. And that's just ends up being so stale. And then one of the things, unfortunately, I call it unlabeled as waste, is the unfortunate with some of the waterfall teams when I accept the story, it's ready to rock. It's ready to go. We can deploy it to the store, and I feel comfortable that, and if there's anything that we did miss, either the engineers missed or I missed, then again, we'll just do an iteration. We'll put another release on out. We'll fix whatever it was, and hopefully so fast, don't even caught what was wrong, what the issue was if I haven't missed something. But otherwise, when I accept a story, it's ready to go. And when working with a waterfall team, suddenly they want to know when will everything be done so that UAT can take place. And so most recently we did have to have, and fortunately it only took about a week for that tester, but I had to write all the test cases, looking in my stories and version in Pivotal Tracker, and then enter them into squids. And didn't find anything. Everything was good. So I was glad to see. We had some questions on some, but otherwise, it was just unfortunate to have that duplicative work and just think of the time spent for that person to spend a week doing it. But I understand that as part of that process, that they needed to, before they would do their release themselves for the service work that they did, they needed to make sure that there were the test cases accounted for in their process. So it's just something that we do deal with, but otherwise, when we're free from those constraints of a waterfall team, if that would just be another Agile team, then I strongly suggest that we don't need to worry about doing a full secondary UAT. By all means, like with this spending account feature, we're very close. Then I'll engage with Tom Delancey and his team can do a run through it. We'll make sure before that it goes. I'm not just going to throw it out there blindly. There you go. As a matter of fact, as we've been developing, I've been sharing as some of the features are being built, and just share the screenshots so that they can see the functionality. So, you know, not just turning a blind eye to everything, but at the same time, it's a bit wasteful when we're independent. Just a bit of effort. Oh yes, and I have invited. In that case, then the person was on the water side, and so I said, well, that's fine. You can test from there, but you're welcome to come on over and join us because then you'd be right there and you'd see how that we work. If you had a question, and then even again, I'd see instances we'd be on a status call, and the PM would say, okay, so then what will happen if you have any issues? And this was the second time I worked with this individual to do the testing, because it happened again at the end of 2016, and she already knew the drill, and she said, well, I'll just get a hold of Matt, and he'll have the engineer take care of it. And so she realized that it was like, if there was something that couldn't be fixed and she needed to like put a defect into Squids that was in that status, then she would have accordingly, but otherwise she basically was just passing all her tests as she went through. Some of them paused long enough to check with us, and if we had to fix something, we fixed it, and she still just passed it and didn't even bother with that whole process of marking it as that it was a defect that needed resolution and plug up the works. So that's pretty much all that I have. That was just a screenshot just showing that up-to-minute feedback. So that's that app I was talking about that's from Android. So you can see there's our latest 3 5-star reviews there. And so it's just great that we're able to, this is like a real-time dashboard. I can look at any point in time and it'll show as of the current state how many installs, how many crashes if there are. As a matter of fact, that part right there is just showing that there's been Monday through today. You can see a couple spikes of some crashes for the MyHumana app. So it's been one crash. But at least if we were wondering what's going on, it'd be a quick way where you can identify it. So it's great to be able to have that right there handy on my phone. So that. Any other questions? I'm tapped out on where I'm sorry.
Yes. So I've been enlisted, outside of work. There's an app called Selfie Radar, and my friends have started it, and I am now the developer for that for both Android and iOS. So first of all, how difficult is it to, because I have an iOS version out there, but I need to start doing the Android version if we're going to grow. And how difficult is it to basically develop from scratch the Android app when the iOS app is out there, and how do you guys handle it? I'm sure you guys built the iOS and Android versions at the same time, simultaneously.
Yes. We did build them at the same time, although initially in the deck it was just iOS, and then Android was brought in about 2 or 3 months after iOS had already kicked off. But and we have tried to stay true to form. Since we went native, even with the previous version of the app, that we wanted the benefits of stay native, don't go doing something funky. That's what we heard from members in the previous version. It was native, but the navigation looked the same for both. So for iOS users, they were not used to the way that Android navigates. So that's what. So that if you've already got the iOS app and it's already got the tab navigation, everything's familiar over there. Then in Android, now just duplicate those features, but stick to the methodology that is reference to other Android apps of like how would they do this. So right now the spending account feature we're working on, one particular part is how you be notified that you have a transaction that needs to be verified. On iOS, there's already a little pig icon that's down in the tab bar for the spending account, and there's a little icon there. Well, on Android, spending account is over in the menu that you have to tap on.
Right, yeah,
so we're working on a visual so that you have to address those kind of things and say, okay, in that case, we're working through a possible option of how, when you're just now, without having to touch anything yet, still seeing that there's something, without it being too disturbing, like throwing up an alert instead, we're going to do it in an icon type of fashion. But, so it's working through those to where when you side by side, so it's, especially if you're the only one doing it, it totally makes sense. If you've already got the one that's done for iOS, now for Android, you're really just going to be able to follow suit and then just let the views be the way they natively should for Android. I will say, Neil might chime in on how that we're going to lean a little bit more here in the future of trying to get some things that will have a little bit more of a standardized feel.
Yeah, I think so. We're working on mobile standards currently, style guide for that, which will probably still lean a lot on the standards, the native elements of material design and iOS, but try to make it so that if one person, the person picked up the same app on both platforms, they wouldn't be shocked by just how different they look, which they kind of do now. Admittedly, they do now. So that's part of our roadmap as well. What I would say to you is that there's a tremendous benefit in kind of working on those things side by side. Because you get a solution for iOS, like, yes, I'm done, and then you're like, oh, wait, that's not going to work with the other one. So it is nice to be able to toggle back and forth between the two as you're working on some new thing, so that you're not painting yourself into a corner that works for one and not for the other. And I still do that. So.
Yes, Sean.
So one of the awesome things I got to witness when you and I worked together on this was you had immediate feedback, with the comments that you showed with actual customers. So beyond user testing, it's in the market, you're getting valuable feedback from people, and you would action on that really quickly. You would turn a complaint into a story, into a 5-star review from long running roadmap, how do you take the things that are bubbling up to the top from customers and still get that work into your roadmap if it's something that needs to be actioned on quickly?
We're struggling with that due to the sheer volume. Currently, and we're looking at solutioning for that of how we handle the feedback from the app. Because currently, if someone sends feedback from the app, it goes to an Outlook mailbox. It is mobile feedback at Humana. That mailbox is maintained by our product support team in India. And so I have shared with them like some template emails to be able to offer replies back, particularly when they might be a customer care issue, has nothing to do with the app, and so that ends up being this generic kind of copy of saying you need to secure a message from the app and contact customer care because we just handle technical issues with the app. But then there'll be the other myriad of issues that could just be those troubleshooting type issues, and they're doing their best. And when you think about it, then those .NET developers are representing us as a customer care face of Humana to them, and so they do their best, and that's when they will handle it in whatever way they can. So we're hoping we're going to be working with the customer service side and see if we can do something where from the app that when someone does have an issue that's more of a customer care, non-technical to the app, that we'll send them on over to get triaged to the right area for someone to be handling through a secure message, and then otherwise that the technical issues will get triaged. But we still struggle with, in a perfect world, and we've talked about us like pairing, because in a perfect world for Neil, he'd have a pair designer with him all the time. I would end up having to be a Robin to my Batman, to where I could really just have someone that would help me writing stories while I'm attending strategy meetings and so on and so forth, and knock things out. You know, that's not going to happen. Well, likewise, in my opinion, I think if Humana is really, really serious about our apps, we should have either be a dedicated team that really handles, that is knowledgeable, preferably sitting right with us, so that they would be handling not just my Humana feedback, but any of the apps feedback, and because they would know what's being developed, they would be communicating to us what needs worked instead. Then what I try, as much as I can on busy days, that also like, oh my gosh, I haven't even looked at mobile feedback all day today, to take a look and go through, so that I can at least look, even if they're ones that they've answered on and they might have already shared with me, but if not, then I see the ones that will service. Like last week when the email went out to the nearly 1 million members, then I immediately, that afternoon and the next day as well, was watching very closely and saw as there were a couple dozen emails that came in, some of them from iOS. The person hadn't even set up Touch ID on their phone yet, so they were just saying, what in the world, I can't even set this up, this is stupid. And so then when I emailed to them and they emailed back, and then it's when I ended up making like kind of a template response, because I said, well, first you gotta make sure you got Touch ID set up on your phone, and here's the link to the Apple FAQ for you to do that. And the person emails back, oh, thanks, yeah, I didn't even have it set up on my phone. So then you can see that's kind of a tricky one for a PSM team to be handling all of those, because they might not necessarily know. So ideally, it'd be great if we had a team that was dedicated to that and had the finger on the pulse of everything that all the teams were working on and properly answer and respond, as well as that the Outlook thing doesn't work. I think about it every time when I'm emailing some app and I send the feedback, and immediately you get that reply back. It is kind of like when you do a secure message, you end up getting a personal email that just says your message has been received. I wouldn't want to do something like auto reply from Outlook. So we're using the wrong tool for the feedback, and it's something that we definitely is an opportunity, not just for our app, but for all of the apps, for us to properly triage the feedback. I think O365 has got a pretty good deal to where their issues are triaged to a team that is in the wellness organization. So then, if they've got it saying, hey, my Fitbit's not syncing, etc., they still might struggle with some of the technical with the app, but they'll know where to go to, and those people are already in that expertise. So that's a good point. I do my best when I do see those. In just the recent past, we've had several stories that have been created from feedback that's come on in that way.
And I would also say real quickly too, that that's why it's so important that we have a specific mobile improvements budget, which we do, but it's tiny, and it's already been tapped down. But going forward to those things, there's not an obvious, for clarity, thing to tie to that you can still kind of dip into another bucket, take it over.
Just one question. So, on the funding side of things, are you still project funding? Or do you have some product-based funding that you're pulling from? Like, what's that look like?
Well, we do have several Clarity projects that are lined up, so we have work that's already lined up for May, June, September, and so that those projects we currently, as Neil just said, we had a bucket of money that was for normal improvements, and so we're already tapping out of that, and we're not yet ready to work on some of that, like 1706 work. So then we wouldn't want to start tapping on into that, be doing, you know, some of our typical improvement things, and having the engineers actually charging time to that project when we haven't even worked on it yet. So that's where we do need some additional money. So in between the clarity projects we've got going on, that we can do some of the work that is needed, either from member feedback or some of it just comes from the team, from us just discussing through. We had a session recently where it was an all-day session, well, it was an all-day, half day, but brainstorming on what we would like to do with no holds barred, what we'd like to do with the app. You know, different things like what we like to have voice integration, what we'd like to, you know, so on and so forth. And just think of some of those things. So they end up being in this running wish list, and provided we had some funding, that's where we could fill in between clarity. So we aren't for a lack of some clarity projects. Some of them, as a matter of fact, you know, the jury's still out as far as we've got some work to do with like some claims work, some benefits work. Both of those can be very sizable. So then, you know, we'll definitely have to take a look at that because it's not waterfall, but it's still going to be enough that we're going to have to chart out how much time it's going to take to work on that. It's not going to be one of those quick releases kind of thing. So.
It's very clear and always has been to me how connected you are with your customers as a product manager, and I think that's one of the strengths, and the team is lucky to have you, and that you think about the customer so much. And this conversation about budget and how your work gets funded makes me think, okay, if the clarity money runs out and your team has to stop developing because there's no clarity project to build to, do you think that outside of your team there's an understanding of what the impact would be on our members?
I don't think that they fully understand the impact that would be. So, and I know that Suzanne and I are dedicated to making sure that we keep that money flowing. You know, we seriously are just talking Lisa Toombs earlier today. We are about tapped out on the 6 effort months that were given to us from the improvements project for us to be able to do the spending account work, which SPA shouldn't have to pay for that because we took it out. Well, I say took it out, but when we rebuilt the app, it was a feature that they paid for in 2014, and all of a sudden in the new app, what do you know? It's not in there. I will say as well, for how many of you actually have Humana insurance? Have an HSA? All right, so as a fast follow, we will be putting in the request funds from HSA. We'll be back in as well for just for Remoca members, for Humana Inc. members. And so that'll be kind of a quiet release so that I'm going to talk with George. Is George in here? I thought I saw him. Or is Sarah? I thought I saw her too. That see if we might be able to do something just to Humana Associates, because I'm not going to put it as a bullet of what's new in the app when we release that because it's not available to people outside of Humana Inc. But it'd be nice to let them know, hey, by the way, you can request HSA funds in the app again, because the town's heard a lot of requests for that, as well as that verification with the photo. That's going to be big. And so we'd like to have one of the features for spending accounts, for secure messages. We've had some enhancements lately to secure messages where you can see your sent items and the ability to see attachments. And the next step would be the ability to add attachments, because a member might have something right in front of them and they want to send to secure messaging, and now they just have a picture. Well, now since we've developed and introduced that functionality of spending accounts into the app, we'll be able to reuse that again, and we look forward to, provided we've got some money to be able to do it, and can find some time to slip that on in. That'd be a big win, so that someone could be able to take a picture of something they have in front of them and send it on off to customer care. So it's those kind of things that we continue. We're full of ideas, and we just got to make sure that those understand. It's not really just about all the whiz bang things. Sure, we'd love to do some sort of voice functionality where you can just say, where's my spending account balance, and or just search for something locally through the app. And that's what people are thinking, like, well, I don't need to give me money for all these bells and whistles, but how about just getting it right and always just making sure that we're adjusting and modifying based on member feedback, et cetera, and we need money for that as well. So we'll continue to fight that. Anyone else? Tom?
First of all, I'm really glad to say that somebody else besides me was asking questions about funding and budget. Carry the flag. A couple things. You keep referring to your testing, and I know the model that we have, which is we're kind of in a waterfall model where we do our development, and then we have a separate business user acceptance testing team that uses squids and stuff. And you said you brushed up against that every once in a while, but one question is how do you do that? Then I have a
Okay, so for that, probably might need to leverage either Max or Mac Gladfelter to be able to explain more microservices in general. But I know that before, with the app, the previous version, that there was just a mobile service, and it was a monster. And so if you needed to change anything in it, you needed to then deploy that whole service on up. And now it's broken into pieces, and we're leveraging those services just being out there in the cloud. And now with this new deployment model, this blue-green deployment model of just how to make a change, not a big deal. That you can just make a change to a service, and the engineer pushes on it and go, done. And so the speed and efficiency is incredible. And the first question was again, it's just like,
your testing.
how do we do the testing?
You talk about users, coming in, and then there's, your
Oh,
basic.
in that regard, typically, and I'm going to just be paraphrasing the way that it works here in the deck, but that if you suddenly add part of a feature, and it might just be some basic paper counts, or they might make it so that it actually just is simulated in the app through like Apture or something, so an app that they're actually just running, and they're just seeing the screens we want them to see, got some mock data, and then just watch as they're, you see them with their finger like, oh yeah, this person's not even finding where to tap. Or then they go to the next screen and just ask them their questions and say, what do you think that you're doing on this screen? What information are you getting here, et cetera. And so it's been informative. Even like currently our claims situation is that members have given feedback on that when we were here in the deck, to where they would look and think, when they're looking at the list of claims, they're looking at the whole family's claims. And currently it is just individually, you have to go to the picker and choose the other member. And so it is something that is an opportunity for us to expand upon that claims experience to where maybe it defaults to the whole family, and then you choose a member, and then if those members are delegated through to a C, et cetera. But those are the kind of things that we end up ideally looking for, so that it just informs when, even when we did the drug pricing and provider finder, were two quite thorough tracks of work that we had done, that the usability was very informative of how we laid out, particularly like the drug pricing, and suddenly the members, we just realized, wow, they're getting stuck on this. They don't know where to go to this next part. It informs the way that we really designed it. And so doing it as you're going along was just so much more efficient than doing it all and almost like in spirit of waterfall, because once you designed it, done, and now a person goes look at it and go, it doesn't make any sense to me. Oh my gosh, shoot, too late now. You've already just, the whole thing's,
Well, I was just going to say too that we have a round of testing coming up. Thanks to the folks in the UX Center of Practice, but it'll be about a week or two from now. It'll be up in Chicago, and it may or may not include someone directly on the home team in those sessions. And so again, I think the value of having someone intimately connected to the product, sort of, if not directly facilitating the process, then they're in the room that can kind of, as they're seeing someone, with the product, and they have questions about how to use the product or the value of the product, et cetera, they can maybe sort of pivot to A to B to C and be able to actually get more out of that session than someone who just has a list of questions that we've sent them to ask, and they may not know exactly what, how to improvise between those questions potentially to discover more things in that process.
All right, no more questions. We're almost at the top of the hour, so thank you so much.
Thank you.